All right, so you know that feeling, right? When you're trying to send money online and it's just, ooh,
Oh, yeah, totally.
like it either takes forever to get there or there's like a million fees,
Hmm.
or it feels like you need like permission from the bank just to move your own money around.
Yeah, you practically need to ask permission. It's like, please, bank, can I send this money?
It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if sending money online was just as easy and straightforward as, handing someone a $10 bill?
Right. Like just instant and no one's looking over your shoulder.
Well, guess what? One of our listeners had that exact same thought. And it's a really, really interesting question that takes us deep into this world of decentralized peer-to-peer cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And the really cool thing is the whole idea for this kind of system, it all started with this one document,
That's right.
the Bitcoin Whitepaper.
Yep, you can think of it as like the founding document, kind of like the recipe for a whole new way of thinking about money.
The original recipe.
That's
So in this deep dive, we're going to be taking a close look at the main ideas in that white paper.
really trying to get to the heart of it,
Yeah, and our mission today.
to explain it in a way that anyone can understand.
Yeah, even if you've never even heard of cryptocurrency before.
But like we're talking, even a 7-year-old or a 70-year-old could get it. We want to lay out, in simple terms, how this type of cryptocurrency actually aims to be a better, faster, and cheaper alternative to the whole traditional banking system.
Right, and we're going straight to the source for this.
No beating around the bush.
Straight to the white paper to see what it says.
Exactly.
Okay, so first things first. The white paper spends a good chunk of time talking about the problems with how traditional banks handle our money, especially online.
Yeah, the author, this person known as Satoshi Nakamoto, they lay out some pretty significant criticisms.
Yeah, like they point out that the whole system is built on this idea of trusted third parties.
You got it.
That's the banks. They're the ones in the middle of everything, making sure things run smoothly, supposedly.
Right, and the white paper argues that even though the system kind of works most of the time, it has some fundamental weaknesses.
Big weaknesses.
Big weaknesses.
So, according to the paper, what are some of the biggest issues with this trusted third-party model?
Well, one of the main things is that it's almost impossible to have truly irreversible transactions. You see, because the banks are in the middle, they can step in to resolve disagreements.
Oh, right, like there's a dispute over a payment.
Exactly.
Okay.
So while that might sound helpful on the surface, it means that a payment isn't actually final until the bank says it is.
Mm,
And this whole process of mediating disputes, well, it costs money, which ultimately ends up as higher fees for everyone using the system.
that makes sense.
Yeah, and on top of that, as the white paper points out, this makes those small, everyday online transactions, well, kind of impractical.
Yeah.
Like imagine trying to send a friend, $5 for helping you out with something. The fees could end up eating a huge chunk of that tiny payment.
Yeah, it's just not worth it in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Nope.
And there's another thing, right? Because payments can be reversed. Businesses online, they have to be super careful. More careful than they would be if you were paying in person.
Oh, absolutely.
Like they might ask for a ton of personal information just to make sure they're not getting scammed.
Mm-hmm. And they still have to factor in a certain amount of fraud as just, part of doing business online.
Right. It's this constant worry.
Yeah, it's a pain.
Yeah.
Think about all the times you've had to, like, verify your identity online, jump through hoops, just to buy something small.
Ugh, yeah, it's like, come on.
Totally.
And the white paper makes a really interesting comparison here. It contrasts all this online banking stuff with how we use physical cash.
Good old-fashioned cash.
Exactly.
Right.
Like when you give someone a $10 bill, that's it.
Transaction done.
Done deal. There's no middleman saying, hold on, let me just check this out first.
Right? Just a simple exchange of value.
So the white paper is basically saying, hey, look, we can do better than this.
That's the heart of it, yeah. So what's the alternative? What are they proposing?
Well, the big idea is a peer-to-peer system. Instead of going through a bank, online payments would go directly from one person to another.
Directly, like cutting out the bank entirely.
Exactly. No middleman. It's like imagine sharing a video or a picture directly with someone on your phone.
Okay, yeah.
You just like beam it right to them. You don't have to upload it to some website and then have them download it.
Right, right.
Peer-to-peer.
So that direct connection, the peer-to-peer thing, that's key.
Absolutely fundamental.
Okay. But then there's this other part, this idea of using cryptographic proof instead of just trusting a bank to keep track of everything. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, right? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, it sounds a bit intimidating. But really, it just means using some really clever math and computer science to prove that a transaction happened and that it's legit.
Okay.
All without needing a bank to keep those records and tell us what's what.
So the math itself is the proof.
Exactly. And this system aims to make it so incredibly hard to undo a transaction.
Like through hacking or fraud or whatever.
Exactly. So hard that it's basically impossible.
Okay, so that's a huge advantage for sellers,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. It protects them from getting ripped off. And the paper even suggests there could be ways to have built-in safeguards for buyers, too, in certain situations. So both sides are protected.
That makes sense. So we're cutting out the middleman, using math to make things super secure,
Mhm.
but there's still a problem, right? How do we stop someone from just like spending the same digital money twice?
Ah, you got it. The classic double spending problem. That was a major hurdle for earlier attempts at digital cash.
Right, because with digital stuff, it's easy to just like copy and paste.
Exactly. So how do you prevent someone from making a copy of their digital money and spending it multiple times? That's where the white paper offers a really clever solution.
Yeah.
A peer-to-peer distributed timestamp server.
Okay, break that down for me.
So imagine like a special online notary public. But instead of just one person, it's a whole network of computers all working together.
Gotcha.
And this network is constantly recording exactly when each transaction takes place, creating a public record that everyone in the network can see and agree on.
So it's like time stamping every payment.
Exactly. It's putting a digital date and timestamp on it in a way that everyone on the network can verify.
Okay, I get that. So instead of relying on one central authority, we've got this whole network of computers keeping track.
Precisely. It's like imagine if everyone had a copy of this shared online notebook.
Like a Google Doc or something.
Yeah, something like that. And every time a payment is made, it gets written down in the notebook with the exact moment it happened. Everyone can see it. Everyone has the same record.
Okay, that makes sense. But couldn't someone still go back and like erase a payment or change something?
That's the brilliant part. That's where the blockchain comes in.
Ah, the famous blockchain. Everyone's always talking about it, but I don't think most people really understand what it is.
Yeah, it can be a bit of a mystery.
So it's more than just a notebook, right?
Oh, way more. Transactions are grouped together into blocks. Think of them like pages in our notebook.
Okay, so each page is a block of transactions.
Exactly. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Each block gets a unique digital fingerprint.
A fingerprint? Like how does a block of data get a fingerprint?
It's called a hash. It's created using a special mathematical process, and even a tiny change in the information within the block will completely change the fingerprint.
Wow. So it's incredibly sensitive.
Super sensitive. And what's even cooler is that each new block's fingerprint includes the fingerprint of the block that came right before it.
So they're all linked together.
Exactly. It creates this chain of blocks,
Sure.
hence the name blockchain.
Oh, okay. That makes so much more sense
I'm
now.
glad to hear it.
So it's like if you tried to go back and change something on an earlier page, like erase a payment or something, the fingerprint of that page would change. And because the next page's fingerprint relies on the old one, the whole chain would be broken.
You got it. Everyone would instantly know that something had been tampered with.
So it's like this tamper-proof system.
Exactly. It becomes ridiculously difficult to go back and change the history of transactions. You'd have to redo the work for that block and every single block that came after it. And that brings us to another key idea: proof of work.
Proof of work. Okay, what's that?
So, to add a new block to the chain, computers in the network have to solve a complex digital puzzle. It takes a lot of computing power. It's like your computer sweating over this problem.
Really working hard.
Big time.
Yeah.
And once that puzzle is solved and the block is added, it's incredibly difficult to undo.
Gotcha. And the longer the chain gets, the more secure the whole thing becomes. Okay, so this is starting to make sense now. It's not one central bank checking everything. It's this whole network of computers working together to make sure the record is accurate and nobody's cheating.
Exactly. And that leads us to these big ideas of decentralization and trustlessness.
Right, because there isn't one authority in control, it's decentralized.
Yep. It's spread out across tons of different computers or nodes all over the world.
And those nodes are constantly talking to each other.
All the time, making sure everyone has the same up-to-date version of the blockchain.
Wow.
Yeah, and because of the cryptographic proof and the way the blockchain is set up, you don't need to trust any specific person or institution.
It's the system itself you trust.
Exactly. The math, the cryptography, the network, as long as most of the computers on the network are honest, meaning they're following the rules, the system stays secure.
That's pretty cool.
It is, and anyone can join or leave this network at any time, and they'll always accept the longest, most work-intensive chain as the correct history. That's how the network stays in sync.
Okay, so let's say I want to, actually send some of this cryptocurrency to someone. How does that work? What does a transaction look like in this system?
So think of an electronic coin as like a chain of these digital signatures we've been talking about. When you want to send some to someone, you basically create a new transaction that includes your digital signature, proving that you're the current owner of that coin. And you include the digital address or public key of the person you're sending it to.
So their address is kind of like their bank account number.
Sort of, yeah. It's how the system knows where to send the coin. This new transaction then gets added to the end of the chain of ownership for that particular coin.
So there's this whole history of who owned what.
Exactly. It's like digitally signing over a check with a clear record of who owned it before you.
And that's a big difference from how banks do things today.
A huge difference. In the traditional system, a central authority, like a bank, has to verify and approve every single transaction.
Right, and keep their own private records.
Yep. With this decentralized system, the verification happens across the entire network through that proof of work and the blockchain we talked about.
No more central authority. Okay, so let's bring it all back to our main point here. Why is this potentially a better, faster, and cheaper way to handle money than what we have with banks today?
Well, first, it can be better because you don't have to rely on trusting a single central authority.
That makes sense.
The network itself checks and confirms transactions, giving you more control over your own money. Second, it can be faster. Because transactions don't have to go through multiple middlemen like banks, they can be processed much more quickly.
That's a big one.
Yeah, especially for international transfers. And third, it can be cheaper. Traditional banks have all sorts of fees for every little thing. In this system, the goal is to have much lower or even zero transaction fees.
That's a game changer for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
But if there are no fees, who's keeping the lights on? Who's making sure the network runs smoothly?
Good question. The incentive for people to support the network often comes from two things. First, there's the creation of new coins as a reward for adding new blocks to the chain.
Right, this is the digital mining.
Exactly. And second, there can be very small transaction fees within the network itself. It might be like a tiny fraction of a cent difference between what you send and what the receiver gets.
So it's built into the system itself.
Yeah, it's like a little incentive to keep things running smoothly.
Interesting.
And the white paper even argues that for someone with a lot of computing power, it's actually more profitable in the long run to follow the rules and earn new coins honestly than to try to cheat the system.
Because if they try to cheat, they risk undermining the whole network.
Exactly. And that would devalue their own coins, too.
That makes sense. So they're actually incentivized, to be honest.
Precisely. It's a pretty clever system when you think about it.
All right, so let's recap those key ideas one more time. We've got direct peer-to-peer transactions that cut out the need for banks. We've got the blockchain, which is this public, unchangeable record of every transaction. And we've got a decentralized network of computers that are constantly verifying and securing everything, all without a central authority. It's a totally different way to think about money and value.
Absolutely. And it directly addresses those frustrations people have with the traditional banking system, those slow transfers, those annoying fees, the feeling that you need permission just to move your own money around.
And this system offers the possibility of real control over your finances, faster transactions, and lower costs.
Exactly. And while we've covered the main ideas here, it's important to remember that there are definitely a lot more technical details involved. But at its core, the fundamental idea is about direct exchange and a community-driven way of making sure those exchanges are legit.
Right. So for our listeners out there, this has been a pretty deep dive. We've thrown a lot of information at you, but hopefully you've come away with a better understanding of what this whole cryptocurrency thing is all about and how it might just change the way we think about money in the future.
And maybe even spark some curiosity to learn more.
Exactly. So here's a final thought for you to consider as you go forth on your cryptocurrency journey. What if sending money online was just as seamless and inexpensive as sending an email or a text message? How would that change things? How would that change how we interact with each other? How would that change the world?
It's a question worth thinking about.
It is.
All right. Until next time, keep on learning, keep on exploring.
To keep on diving deep.